Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, leading publishers of books, directories, educational guides and magazines aimed at schools in the UK and beyond. Enjoy the podcast.
Live from Naples, this is The Morning Break with Jane Ritter.
Morning, everyone. It's lovely to be back. I feel slightly rusty. Happy New Year to all of you. And I've got a really, really interesting guest this morning who I am really, really looking forward to talking with, Roy Boardman.
Live from Naples, this is The Morning Break with Jane Ritter on Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
As I was saying, Roy has many, many years of experience and has been a pillar for many, many people in Naples, where I live. He will be joining us very, very soon. At the moment, let me just tell you a little bit about him. I won't actually tell you how old he is because that would be quite rude. But basically, he has had an extremely long journey in teaching, teacher training, materials writing, ELT management, starting from 1959. He began his teaching career in a UK secondary school and then moved to the British Council in Naples, where he became English language officer for Southern Italy, and then regional director for Southern Italy. He also founded language schools in Naples and has taught at Italian universities, lectured in Paris, Athens, Chicago, Nottingham, and London. He also played a really, really significant role in ELT. And he founded the CELTA course, which at the time I think was the RSA Cert TEFL here in Naples, which is where I actually studied and became a teacher, an ELT teacher. Morning, Susan. Hello. welcome. And morning, Tom. Nice to see you. He has also written with Cambridge University Press. He published course books in 1979, and they were sort of the pioneering course books which put in practice the principles of communicative language teaching. He also has received several awards, but I'm sure that when he tells us about his journey, you will discover more about that. In the meantime, I asked a few people in town about Roy, and a couple of them sent really kind messages. And one of them I'm actually going to read to you because she didn't want to record herself. But this was one of the messages that I received for Roy, and I hope that when he listens back, he will enjoy it. It's from Claire Jenkins, and Claire said, "Roy is an inspiring and brilliant teacher and a wonderful friend who gives great book recommendations. When I think of the ideal teacher, I think of Roy, always full of incredible ideas, always organising innovative projects. Working with Roy has been a pleasure and an honour. As I say to anyone when Roy's name is mentioned, Roy is the best." Well, wouldn't everyone want to have that kind of message dedicated to them? Let me just play you a little message, and it's from one of Roy's colleagues, the lovely Laurie Cohen. Let's just have a little listen to this.
Having worked with Roy on several occasions, I can say that he is the epitome of English teaching, good English teaching. Not only is he a fine teacher, an excellent employer, but he is a person full of ideas, always looking to try something new and innovative. It was a pleasure to work with him. Apart from that, he's an absolutely lovely human being.
Okay. And good morning, Roy. Lovely to have you here with me.
Good morning, Jane.
As
It's
I
wonderful to be here.
as I said in my prelude, I have a little message for you, and it may be that you didn't actually get a chance to listen to it, but I thought it's a lovely introduction to for you to then tell us a little bit more about your teaching journey.
Yeah.
It's a message from Claire Jenkins,
Oh, Claire, yes.
and she says,
Claire for a long time.
She says, Roy is an inspiring and brilliant teacher and a wonderful
Wow.
friend who gives great book recommendations. When I think of the ideal teacher, I think of Roy, always full of incredible ideas, always organizing innovative projects. Working with Roy has always been a pleasure and an honor. As I say to anyone when Roy is mentioned, Roy is the best.
Wow. Well, I mean, let's stop the program there.
Oh, no. I think
Thank you, Claire. If you're listening. Oh. Wonderful. Good heavens. Claire, I've enjoyed every moment of my career, and I've enjoyed every moment of working with you. And you're a wonderful friend and colleague.
Right, tell us about this journey, because I think you'll discover I've got a few more messages for you. Tell our listeners about your teaching journey.
Right. Well, when I think about that, my teaching journey began before I started teaching. And I think this is important because, well, in my case, it's important because the way in which I was as a child and young learner, when I wish I was taught, and the way in which I tried to learn has enormously influenced what I did afterwards and what I decided to do afterwards. I in fact left school when I was 16, and before that, because during the war, you see, because I was born in 1937, and then evacuated into the countryside. And when then I was 5 years old and it was time to go to school, I mean, there weren't really any schools. I mean, people, as teachers were thrown into classrooms, etc. Every morning began with, every morning I remember began with an arithmetic test from 1 to 10. And said, number 1, 2 plus 3, and you had to write it on the slip of paper. Huh? Number 1, 2 plus 3. Of course, I added the number of the question to the answer. And when I got to number 10 every day, of course, it became really much of a problem. And that influenced my learning of math. And I think probably the point is, they didn't teach me to read. And I can't remember having have a book in my hand when I was at school during the evacuation period during the war. Then when I returned to London at primary school, then I had great difficulty in reading, and this influenced tremendously my attitude to teaching young people to read and appreciate what they read. My teaching actually began after teacher training college, because I went to teacher training college, Borough Road College, which was part of the University of London. Even if I left school at 16, they, for some reason, accepted me. They were short of teachers at the time, so they had to train more and more of them. And, so I went through the 2-year training, and started teaching at a secondary school in Essex in 1959, immediately after teacher training. What I did then as a teacher of English kids from the age of 11 up to 18 was immensely influenced by the kind of secondary school that I went to in London, which was a secondary mod, but an experimental comprehensive. And I had a wonderful English teacher who had an immense influence on me. And so by the time I was 14, I could read and I could act. I was into acting. I did all sorts of drama. I got thrown out of the maths class, of course, and had to study biology instead. But that experience of this English teacher whose teaching was very, what we would call now, learner-centered. At the time, that expression didn't exist. Influenced me enormously. So when I walked into classrooms in 1959 in Sandham Secondary School, my first objective was to find all about the kids I was teaching. So I took them through, right through from 11 to the age of 17, because when they were 17, then I decided to come to Italy. That was in 1965. I did an enormous amount of work with drama as a kid. I believed in them finding themselves through pretending to be others, as it were, through drama and acting together and collaborating. So we did productions of Shakespeare plays, of course, etc., and all, and other things. And I also got them into creative writing. And they wrote some fantastic stuff. At one point, I remember, this was the high point of my career in the secondary school. The school was visited by Vanessa Redgrave. She came to prize kicking. She just started her career. She'd been playing in As You Like It at the Old Vic, and she came to give out the prizes. And she saw some of my children's creative writing. Of course, I cornered her at some point to do this. And what happened was that she put on a show in London with herself and Tom Courtney and other actors actually reading these pieces of creative writing.
Oh, wow.
And of course, this was a tremendous thrill to my kids, my students. And I've never forgotten it. They've never forgotten it, I think, because that kind of happened was just before COVID, just before the pandemic. Two of my students of that time came to visit me in Naples. This was a tremendous pleasure to me, of course. And some of them have been continued writing poetry, etc. Some of them published poetry, etc. And they put me in contact with other members of the class. But they were in their 70s when they came.
But they came to see you. That's the amazing thing.
So I inherited this sort of objective to have a very close relationship with students from my English teacher first, and then sort of modified it in various ways. Then in 1965, I came to Naples and joined the British Council, started teaching here. And of course, big problem. I was teaching English in England, mother tongue. The teaching of grammar was clause analysis. A totally different kind of teaching. In 1965, when I came to Naples, there wasn't very much in ELT that you could read about. There wasn't much guidance stuff. I can't remember the title. It was just the two books which we were using there. The only book I remember that was available to, which gave some kind of guidance in ELT was Michael West's Teaching in Difficult Circumstances, but that was all about teaching in Africa.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so it wasn't very much, so you really had to sort of invent it for yourself at that time. So I had to rethink grammar, the teaching of grammar.
Mm-hmm.
I very much repeated what I'd been doing in secondary school classrooms at first. And then it seemed to work, because I got them talking, elicitations, okay, and of course that's very important, English language teaching, getting them to talk all the time.
Yep.
But then, the other grammar of the English language that I knew was clause analysis, which wasn't very much help in teaching, for example, comparative structures and all that sort of thing. Things you don't have to think about when you're teaching in secondary schools in England.
No.
So I sort of tried to invent grammar for myself, because what I started telling myself was the grammar of English, or rather, English grammar is not really the grammar of English, because when the first grammar of English was written and published in the 16th century, I think it was,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was basically the grammar of Latin. It was, and it hasn't changed very much, because we're still talking about subjects and predicates, etc., etc.
Mm.
So I started looking at the language itself. One of the first things I started doing was looking at the language itself and sort of inventing ways of analyzing the language and getting my students to analyze the language in a completely different way. Don't want to go into that very much because it became an obsession, and it's been an obsession all my life. I got my own kind of grammar, okay? Which nobody else would accept, I'm sure. So I started with the British Council in Naples, 1965, and then I didn't have a first degree, you see. I'd gone to Teachers Training College, which is a 2-year course. And okay, it was great because we had teaching practice. That was the most important part of it, basically, the teaching practice, because I learned more from the teaching practice and doing things in the classroom than I ever did from lectures. And where am I? So I needed, if I was going to consider sort of English language teaching as a career, ELT, to foreigners, then I was going to have to get some kind of qualification. So I went back to the University of Essex and did a year an MA in Applied Linguistics. I got into the course. I mean, I didn't have a first degree, but I got into the course because
you had tremendous
I wrote
experience,
a book. I wrote a book, which was never published, of course, about my grammar of the English language, which had nothing to do with subjects and predicates or things that you find in grammar books. And as a result of that, Peter Strevens, a very well-known linguist at the time, who was in charge of the MA course, he invited me onto the course. So I went back and to the UK, and University of Essex did the course. I met this was just before the advent of community language teaching, the first steps towards community language teaching. But it was all, basically, it was all Chomsky. And of course, I'd written my own grammar, so I was very much against Chomsky. But on the course, I mean, my course tutor was, and the main lecturer on the course was Dick Allwright, who is a leader, now. He was young then. And then Chris Brumfitt was a colleague on the course with me. So I met some very, I was on the course and discussing things with some people who became very influential.
Absolutely. I think they're still on, they're still on the Delta reading list now. The pioneered.
Chris, unfortunately, is no longer with us. And
Mm.
he did some wonderful work, and we were always friends. And we did some projects together after the course when I came back to Italy. Because I did come back to Italy, I sort of considered at that time, now, shall I stay back in the UK, or shall I return to Italy, or shall I go somewhere else? I came back to Italy. And because I thought, well, I've only just started there, I better show what my mettle is, and do something now that I'm qualified, because I did a course in applied linguistics. So I came back. I came back to Italy, but I went to the University of Bari, and to the Faculty of Foreign Languages. Met some interesting people there, and as a lectore, as they were called there.
Yep.
Okay, I've always tried to do things which were different from what other people would do. It's my nature. I've always been a bit of a rebel, you see, because I mean, my upbringing was a bit of a rebel. So I introduced all sorts of things in language teaching at the University of Bari, and brought in people who I thought would help. So I invited Peter Strevens. He came to talk about at the University of Bari, talk about setting up language centers. And so they set up a language center. To do it, they paid me to go around the UK visiting other language centers. So I learned an enormous amount about language centers by doing that. Went back to Bari. Then a visit from Don Byrne, who was very influential in the 1950s, 1960s in English language teaching, became a great friend. He was the English language officer of the British Council in Rome at the time. He came, and he introduced me to what the Council of Europe were beginning to do, which led to
the framework of reference.
Yeah, that's right, the framework of reference. And while I was there, I wrote my first book, Over to You, which Cambridge published afterwards, after I came back to Naples. The British Council then, because I did a lot of stuff in Bari, not only at the university, but with the English Language Association there, whatever it was called, I can't remember, and started teacher training. It happened. I don't quite know how it happened, but it happened anyway. There's a lot of drama too. And so after 3 years, the British Council, the director of the British Council in Rome, wanted to send me to Milan as director of studies in Milan. I thought, well, I went up to Milan. I traveled up to Milan. I stayed there for a day. I saw the British Council in Milan. I experienced Milan for a day. Then I traveled back overnight to Bari, picked up the telephone and said, could you find me a similar place in Naples? And so I became English language officer, South Italy, in Naples. That was in 1975. A fantastic opportunity because, there was no teacher center, so I was able to set up a teacher center. I was able to travel all around the South training teachers as English language officer. And that was a fantastic experience until 1980, when they made me regional director for the South of Italy, based in Naples. But I never stopped teacher training and teaching too. Other things that I did before that, which I suppose I should mention, I mean, just before going off to do my MA, I started going into difficult scuola media, where discipline was a problem. Rione Traiano, for example.
Yep.
And I did teaching in the afternoons, and I did a lot of drama. I did drama with very difficult kids, Shakespeare in English. I mean, they did a production of a famous final scene of Midsummer Night's Dream, which the school inspectors loved. They did it all in English, these kids. It was on the Italian radio, and the kids were thrilled. You had to give young people this sense of achievement, and that was that. So I've gone back in time. That was a flashback.
That's a lovely memory. Lovely.
Well, that sort of thing influenced everything. That kind of thing sort of went on influencing other things, and I got into then language and literature, integrating language and literature teaching, and published a book with Cambridge with John McCrae called Reading Between the Lines. That was in 1984. We were passionate about this teaching of language literature. So that was another stimulating experience, especially working with John.
He's personality, isn't he, John McCrae?
Yeah, a real personality, and he still has it, of course. So, well, even more so that. He's a great teacher. Then, okay, I was director of the British Council until 1995. And I'd been director for a long time. It wasn't normal, the British Council, as you will know.
No.
The director of it. But people around the world started complaining. Boardman's still there, no? But I didn't want to go to Saudi Arabia or anything like that. That was not my.
Yeah. What was the draw with Naples? What made you decide to stay in Italy?
There were personal reasons as well as professional reasons, and the personal reasons were very strong.
Yeah.
I had two kids who were being brought up in Italy, for example, and I wanted to get back to them, or at least near them, which is the personal side to it. And the other thing is that, well, I think I thought that I came back after the MA to Italy and remained here because I thought I'd left things undone. Things I wanted to do and develop. And that's exactly what I did, opening teachers' centres and that sort of thing. The other thing I want to mention, during both English language officer, South Italy, and director, we did the first distance training course for Italians all over Italy. And basically, I was in charge of this, in charge of developing it and getting the other English language officers, etc., to write the material for it, prepare the material. And we trained Italian trainers. We had a wonderful 2 weeks in Rende,
in Calabria.
Where, okay, I invented a way of doing this. Also for the content, because I introduced something which I called aches, not as in aches and pains, which I suffer from now, but AKES. It's a kind of learning cycle. The A being awareness, so awareness raising. Aches, A. The K being knowledge, which is input after the introduction after the awareness is raised. And the E is experience, that is getting into the classroom and doing things. And the S is skills, while you're experiencing, develop your skills, which you can put in any order. It doesn't, I mean, when we were training the trainers who then trained Italian teachers all over Italy, they followed this cycle, but beginning at different points sometimes. So sometimes they began with the awareness, and sometimes with the experience, etc., etc. Okay, there's a great deal to it, which I won't go into now. What we did was encouraged Italian public libraries and other establishments to give space to Italian trainers to hold weekly training sessions with teachers from the schools, School of Media and the and so all these Italian trainers had their place every week when they did this. Of course, this was before internet. It was distance training. It was before internet. And
so you had to. Did you have to post out all the materials?
Right. Yes. Exactly. But it was a wonderful experience. And then the other thing, of course, was, which I haven't mentioned because I begin to forget things all the time, is before CELTA we had the RSA certificate in the teaching of English, which I introduced in Naples. They had already introduced it in Milan, but they'd given it up, saying it was too costly. So I did it in Naples all by myself. Versus I didn't have to pay anybody. I did it all by myself as English language officer. So I actually trained the teachers who were at the British Council in Naples by using the new RSA certificate, which eventually, as you know, became Cambridge CELTA. That was a fantastic experience. There was also COTI. COTI was the certificate for overseas teachers.
Yeah. I think
where have I got to in the? Sorry.
So I think I was probably the last RSA certificate candidate before it became then moved on to become CELTA, because I did my certificate at the British Council in 1996. So the year after you left.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. It's a coincidence, isn't it?
The British Council in Naples.
Yeah. Yep.
No, there.
Okay. There you
go. Who was running the course?
It was Frank. Yep. It was Frank. And Claire Tonks was my tutor.
Ah, yes, okay. Fine. Great.
And Mary Woodwis, obviously. Bless her. And Mary.
Oh, dear Mary, yes,
Yeah.
dear Mary. Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, we can have a chat about that at another time. Yep. So, Roy, you then, after the British Council, you then went on to universities, I believe, and transformed.
Well, not immediately. I actually founded a school of English in Naples. This was it was an invitation to me and a young colleague whose name is Caterina Liotto, who is now pro-consul.
Yep.
And a bank was sold in Naples, and with the money, they wanted to set up a British International School in Naples. They invited me they gave me 8 months to find premises for it and set it up. So Caterina and I did that together, but in the end, we didn't find suitable premises, so time had run out. So they decided to use the money to set up St. Peter's English Language Centre in Naples, in the Riviera di Chiaia. And I directed that for some time before I then left and set up my association, which is the Associazione Boardman English, and the main project there is the online school British English Worldwide, where I'm trying to sort of humanize, shall we say.
Let's just pause. Yeah.
Humanize. Yeah.
Let's pause for a minute, and we'll be right back after the break.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, a leading publisher of books, directories, educational guides and magazines specifically aimed at forward-thinking schools in the UK and beyond. Have you checked out their latest releases? Don't miss out! Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading!
And we're back with the wonderful Roy Boardman.
Oh.
Roy, we were talking about how you have evolved as a teacher, and your teaching began, I mean, sort of pioneering ELT, really. What are you doing now?
I started about 9 years ago, I think it was, to experiment with online teaching using Skype. I've set up an online school of English, which is ready to go rather than truly functional. It's called British English Worldwide. It's a new experience that I've been working on.
But you started it
pretty hard.
9 years ago, so you're actually ahead of
because
ahead of your time.
Well, I didn't intend to be ahead of anything or anybody. It's just that okay, I'm not a spring chicken. I'm no longer very young, so I was finding it very difficult to get around. But I definitely wanted to continue teaching. I sort of almost can't live without it, really. So I thought, well, okay, I don't like the alternative of going online. I mean, it takes the classroom and its space and walking around it, the kids there, etc., etc. It takes it all away, perhaps. But I thought, well, okay, let's see. So I started with individuals, and then with groups, and then set the school up as a website. I call it a web-based school, because the website is sort of the school building. And we have now 5 teachers waiting to teach on it. Waiting to teach, because we're functional, but it's very new. It's a good thing for a new year, 2023. And it has a kind of a virtual teacher talk room, that is a staff room, which is at the moment in the form of a WhatsApp group. But okay, and a teacher's library, but not just books. I mean, everything else, all recordings and videos and that sort of thing, listed, and where to find them on the internet, etc., etc., for teachers. So, because all teachers, myself included, continued to need encouragement with new things coming in, new ideas to think about and share. And so the meetings take place not only on WhatsApp, they also take place on Skype. We use Skype. You're probably going to say, why Skype, etc., etc. It's because I began 9 years ago with Skype and got very used to it's the way in which it functions, etc. And so that's it for the moment. I'm not against I'm not against Zoom or anything else. But no. I'll have to try that. I know that the teachers who are waiting for work with the school, they all use other platforms too, Zoom and Meet. So it's what I like to say is it's a way of translating a physical school online, knowing that there are certain things you cannot replace. You can't really replace the actual physical presence, which is fundamental to any educational situation. However, there are other advantages, like students not having to move around to go to the school. They might, however, enjoy that very often. I think they probably do. Teachers working, and then of course the classroom becomes a multiple classroom, because students are in their own homes. So the classroom becomes a series of homes, including the teacher's home, and we share all these and we can talk about them. It puts students in a personal background, each one of them.
Yeah.
So that is something you can do. And now I'm very enthusiastic about it. It's ready to go. And if there are teachers who would like to know more about it, just let me know. They can contact me on my professional email, which is ELT, English Language Teaching.
Absolutely.
ELT@boardman.it.
Wonderful.
ELT@boardman.it. That's it.
Yep.
You know, since you know about it, since we share ideas,
It
sharing ideas
sounds
in the
wonderful.
teaching
Yeah.
profession so much. It's so very important.
You, I mean, in your time, you've done an awful lot to support teachers. I've got a little message here from one of the teachers you have supported over time. Hang on a sec. Whoops.
Hi Roy, this is Fergal. I am so happy to have you both as a friend and a mentor. I remember discussing Tune Into English with you before it ever started, and your enthusiasm helped turn the spark into a flame. The worksheets that you have contributed to the site are amongst the teachers' favourites. As I've said many times, you are an ELT guru. I look forward to catching up with you and Rena very soon. Happy New Year!
Fergal.
Oh, dear me.
Another person who has inspired me. Songs.
He considers you that his guru, which I think is really lovely. Yeah. Okay. Moving on from that, can you tell me about the people who inspire and influence you?
The people who inspire and influence me now are very much those who did it in the past and continues to do so, of course. No? They're different in different ways, of course. Who inspires me now? I have to remember names. Well, Scott Thornberry's work. His work on dogma.
Yep.
And materials light teaching and getting rid of the course book. I'm all for that. I use it a lot, in fact. In fact, for many, many years, and many teachers know that many, many years, I taught something called free speech, a course which started, God knows when, a very long time ago in the past, and which I still do with different groups of people. And free speech is exactly what it seems to be. You can say what you like when you like, but okay, I have a way of course, eliciting things that I want to be said, and in what way. So Scott Thornberry's work on dogma, an unfortunate name, but anyway. But I'm very interested in the idea of emergent language, and working on the language which comes from the student, which emerges during the lesson to work on.
Yeah.
What I do not agree with is actually not using materials. I think that now with internet, of course, you can get the materials you want in a second. Yeah. Okay. Somebody said that. 3 people have said that, and they said it very well. We'll work on that in this lesson immediately, you know. And okay, but I need a picture. I need a picture to do this. So here it is, Google Pictures and other things. Yeah? And whether you're in a classroom or online, you can do that. And so I love the idea of working with emergent language students. I've written course books myself, but and I know that they are so very important in many different ways. I do think, though, that there are many times when one should walk into classrooms and say, let it happen.
Yeah, and there are a lot of arguments for, is this material
And
really
it's a whole, and
that's
it's
a
a
whole new radio show for us, Roy. And you're right. There's actually a movement. Fergal is an example of that, for creating materials specifically for example, Italian learners, and making it age appropriate. It's really, really important.
Yeah.
Roy, can you share with our listeners a personal or life goal? I know you've already achieved so much.
So it doesn't have to do with teaching then.
Could be.
It's a life goal. Okay. I would like to complete. I've written and self-published one novel, okay, which is autobiographical. That novel, by the way, says a lot about my experience as a learner in the secondary school when I was young.
Is
it's
that
all based on that, in fact.
That's Honky Tonk, yeah?
That's Honky Tonk, yeah. Okay, self-published. I'm writing another novel. It takes me a very long time to do creative writing. And okay, so I want to complete a novel which is about the cultural artifacts of a people being stolen from them. Not money being stolen, not anything of material worth, except for the fact that things which are material represent an aspect of the culture of a people. That disappears. It gets stolen in a certain way. And then, the novel is about how it all comes back and what happens to the people without their local culture and without some high-level culture as well. That's because, in fact, the paintings disappear. The sculpture disappears, and all sorts of things which their craft work disappears. What happens to the people? Okay, there's a kind of death in that.
Fascinating.
So my life goal, basically, is to finish that. I probably never will, but there we are.
I do hope.
I like writing it.
Yeah. When we were talking about your journey, you've received many prizes for your work over your career. One of them is an MBE, which
I could call it a prize.
Tell me about the others, because I think they're.
Well, I did a lot of teacher training work in Calabria when I was English language officer with the British Council, and afterwards as director. Calabria is the largest region in Italy, isn't it? So there's a lot of work to do there, a lot of teachers. And this was recognized, and I was given the Premio Calabria for that. Then in Naples, there was an international prize called the Sabetiatea, based on the idea of Sabetio, Paternate, etc., etc. The Premio Internazionale Sabetiatea in 1980 something, can't remember when. And then in recent years, or just before the pandemic, the Premio Internazionale Panzago, Panzago, the 17th century architect, Neapolitan architect, for my work in Naples for sort of basically opening the horizons in Naples, because when I was director of the British Council, you probably know, I brought into Naples the major writers of the time, some artists as well. Huh? And that was quite a battle, because Naples was not like the British Council in Rome, and it was not like the British Council in Milan. They had all these people coming in, and so I made a big complaint. What about Naples? And so one of the things I got them down to come down to Naples, not just to talk at the British Council, but also into the universities, where they could. So P.D. James, for example, talking about her latest novel to students at the Orientale who were actually studying it that year. Okay, for that kind of relationship with Naples, they gave me this prize, which I'm very happy to have. I don't think I've got any other prizes.
Well, I do have another message for you, which you'll need to listen to when we play it back, because it doesn't seem to be working. But I hope you enjoy it. It's from Ciro Merola.
Oh, hello, Ciro.
For our listeners, it's in Italian, but Teachers Talk Radio. We cover the whole world, and I'm sure that a few seconds of Italian won't hurt.
Ricordo Roy Boardman con molto piacere, infatti di lui ho sempre un bel ricordo. Era molto attento ai problemi del suo personale del British Council di Napoli, di cui io ne facevo parte. Durante la sua direzione, il British Council di Napoli ha sempre avuto grande successo sia per la diffusione della cultura britannica a Napoli. Infatti Roy ha sempre organizzato ed è stato promotore di conferenze e convegni di importanti personaggi britannici. È sempre con lui il British Council di Napoli ha avuto grande successo per l'insegnamento della lingua inglese. Lui stesso è stato ed è un bravo insegnante. Ricordo anche quando ci sono stati dei problemi al British Council di Napoli, però Roy insieme al personale alla fine li ha sempre superati. Ciao Roy, un abbraccio da Ciro.
Thank you, Ciro. That was lovely. Roy, can you tell us a fun fact about you that people don't know?
Oh, yeah. Let me see. Okay. Sometime in the 1980s, late 1980s, sometimes in my career, I've been asked to work as an interpreter, not professionally, but could you interpret? And I'm hopeless at this task.
Me too.
People think that because I'm English, and because I'm English and because I teach English, etc., but I'm a hopeless interpreter. I get everything muddled up. Anyway.
It's usually because they talk for too long and you've forgotten what they've said.
As you know, I took the British Council from the Riviera di Chiaia after the damage done to the building by the 1980s earthquake to Via di Mille, Palazzo Daulos, where you possibly did your.
That's where I did my CELTA. Yeah.
Right. And okay, that was a big move. After we moved in, Princess Margaret was invited to Naples. She stayed with Prince Davalos, that is, in the building where the British Council was.
Wow.
Okay, I knew the prince. We had a good relationship. And he invited me to lunch with Princess Margaret in the garden, his garden at the back of Palazzo Davalos. Imagine while we were having lunch in the garden, all the staff of the British Council were hanging out of the windows trying to see. And so there I was at this round table, sitting next to Princess Margaret, next to her Lindsay, her son. Prince Davalos immediately opposite me, and the rest of the space filled with duchesses. There all seemed to be duchesses. And okay, I think that I was probably invited to this lunch simply because Prince Davalos wanted me to interpret it. That's why I was sitting next to Princess Margaret. At a certain point, between courses, the plates were empty. We were waiting for the next course. Very embarrassing moment, because when you're with royalty, you can't actually begin the conversation. No, you can't. You're not allowed. I was told that I couldn't do it, but I did actually. Then Prince Davalos started making gestures to me, indicating the bottoms of the plates. Now, I realized that the tableware, the plates, were Bourbon originals. And he was pointing to under a plate. And I thought, he wants me to show her the Bourbon crest. Now, this is very, what do you do? I mean, how do you, sitting with Princess Margaret, how do you actually lift up your plate and show her the Bourbon crest? But this is what I actually did. I actually stood up. I thought, well, I'll go for it. So I stood up, picked up my plate, turned it over. And as I stood up and turned over the plate, all the duchesses all stood up with the plates in their hands and turned over to look at the Bourbon crest. Okay. And that's when I said, Prince Davalos would like me to show you that these are Bourbon originals.
Wow.
After which we all sat down. Okay.
Wonderful. What a wonderful, wonderful story, Roy. Thank you for that. Do you have a favorite film?
I love the cinema. I have lots of favorite films. I think why a film is a favorite depends on so many different things. It doesn't depend only on the film. It also depends on the circumstances in which you saw it, like reading a book, the circumstances in which you read a book. So the one that comes to mind is a 1952 film, Charlie Chaplin, Limelight, with Claire Bloom as well. It was a very special time of my life. I was 15, 1 year before leaving school. And I'd seen Claire Bloom in her performance as Juliet at the Old Vic. And so I was very much attracted to going to the cinema and seeing this film, thinking, I've seen her on stage, and this is Charlie Chaplin too. And of course, it's a very, I found it a very moving film. A film which is very simple, but which is all about enjoying life as the moment in which you experience it. And not paying too much attention to what happened in the past and what's going to happen afterwards, but sort of reacting. That's why I like the emerging language in the classroom. Yeah.
I've got one last message for you from Laurie Cohen,
Laurie,
who sends regards. We'll just take a minute to listen to it.
Having worked with Roy on several occasions, I can say that he is the epitome of English teaching, good English teaching. Not only is he a fine teacher, an excellent employer, but he is a person full of ideas, always looking to try something new and innovative. It was a pleasure to work with him. Apart from that, he's an absolutely lovely human being.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
All right. I think we could probably talk for another hour. I would love to.
That would be lovely. But,
I would love to continue the conversation come back, come and join the radio show again,
Oh,
and
that
tell
would
us
be
about
wonderful. Next
all
time
your.
I'll be more relaxed and I'll go back and say what I've said in a different way, or I'll even change the facts.
I don't think you should. I don't think you should. It is it's wonderful to talk with you. And I don't think you realize how many people you have influenced their teaching, and helped their careers, and there are thousands of them that have benefited from it. And I think the sort of,
I find it very moving to hear that.
I think the core drive behind you and the way you teach is that you put the learner at the center of learning, and it's just it's so inspirational.
What else
Roy.
is there to teach him?
Exactly, yeah, but some teachers don't quite get that.
I mean the structure with the verb teach, no? It has two kinds of direct objects. You teach a subject, teach English, or you teach learners, or you teach students. Huh?
That's the huge difference.
The one I prefer is teaching the learners. Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you, Roy.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
Jane.
so much for talking with me.
So much enjoyed going back over my career and remembering things which I'd forgotten, basically. And
there are stories that need to be told.
And I'm so grateful to all the people I've been in contact with during my career. Teachers, learners, and might I say, the non-teaching staff of the British Council.
Yeah. Thank you, Roy.
Who were themselves a great inspiration.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay.
Thank you, Roy.
Great.
And I will
see
you soon. Happy New Year.
I'm so happy with this. Thank you. Happy New Year to everybody. If it's still being recorded.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.